Marty, thank you very much for the nice presentation. Lastly, we're going to move right along to our fourth and final speaker, Ms. Katrina Currie. Katrina is an energy policy analyst with the Commonwealth Foundation. She's been a member for 3 years now. They are based in Harrisburg. Katrina has her degree in environmental sciences. Please welcome Katrina Currie.
Hopefully this will come up. So I'm Katrina Currie. I work for the Commonwealth Foundation, so I'm just going to give you a brief summary of what the Commonwealth Foundation is so you know why we're interested in this. The Commonwealth Foundation, we're in Harrisburg, and we consider ourselves Pennsylvania's state think tank. And what that means is we craft free market policies to try to convince Pennsylvanians of the benefits of free markets, and we counter attacks on freedom. So we're really looking at what's going on in the state of Pennsylvania, how does it affect you, what is the legislature doing, and we try to get information out to the public and to the legislature to make them know that we know what's going on and make sure you guys have a voice, because it's very hard when you have your job to always follow what the legislature is doing, and so that's what we do. When I came onto the Commonwealth Foundation, we were just starting to look at the Marcellus Shale, so I kind of took it from the beginning to where we are now. And when I first came on, I didn't know what I was going to think. I came to the foundation with a degree in environmental science, which is abnormal for the policy world, but I knew how important policies are, and that's why I wanted to get involved. To give you some more background, so when I came on, I started doing research. We started talking to brilliant gentlemen like the ones we have here, to the Department of Environmental Protection, the Susquehanna River Basin, and then we went into the communities, and we started talking to the locals to find out what were their experiences, what we were going on, and that's the message that we're trying to bring out to you guys and to make sure that their story is really getting heard. Because of where I'm coming from, environmental regulations is very important, and I wouldn't be able to come up here and say how much I support the development of natural gas if it wasn't for how responsible and how well regulated they are. So I'm sure that that's the one thing you're going to take away from here today, is that it is highly regulated. All right, so the first slide that will come up eventually, what you're going to see is within the federal and state, there's nearly 20 acts and laws, and those get broken down to many more that you saw within each state has their different regulations and permits that each one has to follow. One of the most controversial and contentious ones you'll hear about is the Clean Water Act, because what you'll hear is people say drilling is not regulated by the Clean Water Act, and fracking isn't regulated, and therefore it's polluting our waters and becoming a health threat. So it's important to understand that drilling is regulated within the Clean Water Act, the federal law, but hydraulic fracturing is not. And the reason that is because it was decided that the states were better suited to regulate fracking, and that's what I would agree is true. So what we have right now in Pennsylvania is we have these state regulators who have their feet on the ground, who know the issue, who are the ones who daily are there, who are the ones who are regulating drilling, and I think that's really important. It's actually a good night to be talking about Marcellus Shale, because one of the regulations that might be passing even right now while we're talking is a tax on Marcellus Shale. So in my presentation, we're going to be talking about that. And spoiler alert, I'll talk about it now. But what happened was they have been debating a Marcellus Shale fee for a while, and the House and the Senate had different bills. And what happens when the House and the Senate can't agree on a bill, it's called that they can't reconcile it, and it gets sent to conference committee. So we had these two Marcellus fee bills that we knew were going to go to conference committee, that kind of just lingering. Well, then what happened, Super Bowl, and most people were probably watching the Super Bowl, as was I, the media leaked that a deal had been made that many of us weren't aware of, so kind of one of those behind closed door deals had been made between the legislature on this new tax bill, and it got put into conference committee today, voted on, or last night actually, it got put into conference committee and voted on, then today the Senate passed it, and the House might be passing it right now. And what that all means is that it would go to the governor to get signed. Well, let me tell you, if I had my If I had my slide, it would be a lot better. But we consider this to be a bad bill. What we said at the Commonwealth, well, don't worry, I can talk for a while. What we said at the Commonwealth Foundation is we would support what's called a principled impact fee, meaning that if local communities are having impacts that aren't being compensated, they should have a way to charge a fee for that impact. Any business, Marcellus Shale anyways, you pay for the government you use. And we haven't found that to be the case. We believe that our regulations are such and the drilling industry is being held accountable. So for example, for roads, you'll hear get talked a lot about the damages, but state law requires the drilling industry to pay for any road damage that they cause if the road is posted. Now, a lot of communities have been entering into drilling agreements with the local government and the drilling industry, and those have been working out really well. So that's a way, it's actually cheaper for both to kind of work out these legal agreements. But they've been finding ways to make sure the drilling industry has been held accountable. The drilling industry, I think in 2009, put $200 million into improving local roads, and that was above and beyond what was required of them. That's more money than a severance tax, a tax on natural gas, would have generated in that 1 year. So we're actually seeing that the industry is putting a lot of money back into communities. So back to answer the original question of what's in the bill. Originally what the bill was a fee, but what happened after it went into conference committee and came back out is it came as a tax. And we kind of, the way the Commonwealth Foundation would separate the two is if it's a fee charged for a service versus a price that kind of goes up with the price of natural gas. So every well, if they have a tax, it's going to be the same price and it's going to depend on the price of natural gas. Another thing that happened that was unfortunate is that we said if you're going to charge a fee, it should go to the local communities being impacted, not the whole state, not to statewide programs. That was another thing that changed. Now, a large portion, if not the majority of the money, is going to be going to the state. Absolutely. And if you can see the slides, I have examples there. I might get some of the numbers wrong, but there's $1 million going to rail freight assistance. Money will go to beautification projects within the state. Actually, I think someone mentioned there's Shell has the chemical processing plant called a cracker. There's, I don't know, maybe $10-ish million to try to bribe the company to come to Pennsylvania. And what we say is, if we want the company to come, let's have a great business climate. Let's be competitive and have the company come that way instead of trying to bribe them to come with subsidies. So there's a number of things like that in the bill, and it's one issue is the Pennsylvania Oil and Gas Fund. It's going to take money for purposes that it was originally using it and also send it to something called Growing Greener. Now, Growing Greener originally, all right, you guys have heard of Growing Greener. Region. Growing Greener, when it was originally adopted, I think it might have been under Ridge, it got changed significantly when Rendell came, and it became a way to give renewable energy companies money to do projects. Exactly. It started doing subsidies. So areas like Philadelphia, through Growing Greener, got money to put solar panels on schools. The Philadelphia Museum got some type of flower garden. Not the use of funds that they were intended. And so what we're seeing is this bill has a lot of redistribution to special interests. Absolutely. So we're calling this a tax, and hopefully the legislature isn't voting it through, but likely it's probably getting voted right now while we're talking. These are just there's a plethora of things to know about this industry, but a couple that I think are key is that you can't just start drilling. There are endangered species surveys that need to be done. As a person who cares about the environment, I think it's important for people to know it isn't haphazardly happening. There's great examples of the industry wanting to go above and beyond regulations, trying to work with Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission to make sure invasive species aren't getting spread, looking at using acid mine drainage water. The Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection is actually looking to help this happen, so that way the water that they're getting from drilling will be water that's already damaged from acid mine drainage and actually be improving. And I think this is important to note because a lot of people, we remember the past. Pennsylvania has had a history with environmental problems where it wasn't well regulated, but that's not what we have now. We've learned from our past, and this is a heavily regulated industry. The reason this is important is because people who often attack the industry will say Pennsylvania is just trying to bribe the industry to come here. We're so much easier than neighboring states, and this is not true at all. What you see is actually, if you can read it, Pennsylvania compared to Ohio compared to West Virginia, and then the two bills to your right, Senate Bill 1100, was one of the Marcellus tax bills, but they also increased the drilling regulations. The other one is House Bill 1950. But the takeaway from this is that Pennsylvania was around or par with its neighboring states, and this new legislation that's going to pass is going to make us a lot stricter. So Pennsylvania is by no way bending over backwards for the drilling industry. We are, if nothing else, becoming a little less competitive than the neighboring states because of our regulations. I want to just go over some of the regulations, but I like to look at it this way and this and kind of show how a lot of what you're hearing is not true. I'll kind of ignore some of the ones that have been talked about. The Pennsylvania Department of, the DEP, from now on, the Department of Environmental Protection, the DEP does require water management plans, so what that means is they're not just taking water out wherever they want. The DEP will know where they're getting the water to make sure the water table doesn't drop too low. There's also the Susquehanna River Basin Commission. They have a lot of monitoring if anyone's taking water out. Let's see. Another issue I think that was mentioned is important to know that our standards in Pennsylvania have been increasing. So anytime that water is used by the drilling industry and they want to put it back into Pennsylvania streams, it is drinking water standard before it hits our waters. The Marcellus Shale industry is held to a higher standard than other industries in the state. As I put in red, the total dissolved solids, which is the salts and metals and minerals in the water, is 300% more stringent for the drilling industry than other industries in the state. The other thing is there are different ways that the wastewater is being used. They can recycle it, and that's what a lot of companies are doing. So after the well is drilled, they'll take that water, they'll recycle it, and they'll use it for the next well. The other options are they can treat it and put it back into the water, or as it's happening right now, they're shipping it to Ohio, and Ohio has this thing called, oh, I'm going quicker. Let's see. All right, what's happening now? And that's what we were just talking about. So House Bill 1950 is the one that the legislature is possibly passing. Here's kind of a look of what's in it. This probably doesn't have a laser. But once they get the impact fee money, the first thing they do with the money is they give it to some state programs. Then what's remaining after that 60% goes to local communities, and then 40% goes again to state programs. And as you can see, there's 50 million easy right off the bat that's going to handouts. Here's kind of what we said should have taken place, and that's principles, and that's pay for the government you use. You should be able to charge a fee for uncompensated costs, not to go to statewide programs. The drilling industry should be paying the same taxes and fees as every other industry, and there's no loopholes for the drilling industry. They pay the same corporate taxes. It should be imposed at the local level, not the state level. And before we should charge a new fee, we should be looking at the current fees and taxes we have. For example, there's a hotel tax, but one of the complaints local communities have said is that once you stay in a hotel for, I think it's 2 or 3 months, you're no longer paying the hotel tax. And that instead of charging a fee, should we be looking to make sure our current taxes are designed correctly to do what they're supposed to do before we start enacting new taxes and fees. Another big complaint you'll hear is every state has a severance tax or a natural gas tax. Why shouldn't we? This ignores kind of the overall business climate. A lot of states that have natural gas taxes, for Texas, for example, doesn't have a corporate or a personal income tax. Pennsylvania does, and our business climate isn't as inviting. So we would say that instead of having a Marcellus Shale tax, and here's kind of a chart that shows you. So you can see these are, in 2007, the top producing states. This shows you if they have a corporate net income tax and what their state and local tax burden is. And Pennsylvania has the 10th highest state and local tax burden. A tax, as the legislature might be passing right now, it'll have effects. The price of natural gas they can't pass on, but it is true that the industry will find other ways, and that might be less investment in the state, less jobs, less wages, but there'll be a cost when there's a tax passed. So conclusion, just for this, is that it is well regulated in the state of Pennsylvania. And that's one of the great things to say, is that this has kind of been the golden goose coming to Pennsylvania. It's creating tens of thousands of jobs. It's putting Pennsylvanians back to work. It's saving family farms. It's generating wealth, and it's lowering natural gas prices. And this is one of the things we want to see in Pennsylvania get developed. We support, if there are costs to local communities, that they be addressed, but that a proper means would be a fee and not a tax. We're waiting to see, and that's one thing we would invite all of you guys to help us with too, because we want to make sure you guys know what's happening in the legislature, but if we are just talking about the Commonwealth Foundation, it is not as important to them as if they're hearing from you, their constituents. So that's one thing, is we want to be a voice to make sure you know what's going on and that you can let your legislature know how this affects you. So to consider us a resource for you guys to use, and on our webpage we make all this information available, and I'm happy to talk to any of you afterwards personally.